Get in on the secret. September is one of the best times to visit the Boardwalk Plaza Hotel in Rehoboth Beach. The weather is grand, and just steps from the sand, you can relax and experience the convenience of their oceanfront location right on the Rehoboth Beach Boardwalk. Enjoy Victoria's Restaurant, the charming Plaza Pub and room service. Visit boardwalkplaza.com and book your perfect getaway today, or call 800-33-BEACH for fast, friendly assistance. Thanks to the Boardwalk Plaza for being the Bridge Podcast Network sponsor.
You might be asking yourself, why do Christians believe in Jesus? That's why you tapped on this particular episode, or clicked, no judgment if you're on a web browser on your computer. Either way, why do Christians believe in Jesus? Part 1. I'm Mark Dickey.
And I'm Bert Miller.
This is the Why Do Christians podcast. Hey, welcome to the show. My name is Mark Dickey. I host the afternoon show on the Bridge radio station. My co-host, Pastor Bert Miller from Solid Ground Church. Bert, how are you today?
Mark, the people's champion, Dickey.
Oh,
I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here.
Very sweet of you. Well, I was in a wedding over the weekend, and it was very, very dusty.
Okay.
It's a harvest season.
They didn't clean the venue where the wedding was?
The venue
Were you in a haunted
was
house?
the earth.
Oh,
it was
outdoors.
Open. It was an outdoor wedding.
Okay.
And I got a ton of allergy stuff going on, and so my voice sounds terrible, but it gets more gravelly.
Yeah.
So actually, when I'm on the radio, it gets extra gritty.
You sound like you've been chain smoking for 20 years, and it's working for me.
We have this song by Zach Williams called Chainbreaker.
Okay.
And yesterday during the show, I wanted so bad to go, that's Zach Williams with Chainsmoker.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you didn't do that.
Yeah. I could say that with our podcast friends.
Sure. I'm sure Zach would have no issue with that if you did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, today we're going to talk about why do Christians believe in Jesus? And it seems like, is oxymoron the right word? Like, how can you be a Christian if you don't believe in Jesus?
I don't know if that would apply here, but yeah, you or maybe it does.
Maybe, but it's
I don't
why.
think it's, yeah.
Why do Christians believe in Jesus?
These are great questions.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and this is specifically part 1 because as we were prepping for this episode, we realized there's a whole lot of different angles that we can talk about this.
Because there's so many reasons.
Yeah. And so in this first episode, we're going to be talking about the sort of, if you could think your way into being a Christian.
Logical arguments,
intellectual arguments.
Yeah.
All right. It's almost like you're deciding on like a new laundry detergent. Like, okay, well, let's look at the pros and cons.
Well, should we maybe even clarify, like, I was thinking about this a little bit, because lots of people believe in Jesus, but maybe not the same Jesus that Christians believe in.
That's a great point.
Should we maybe just clarify what we mean by Christians believe in Jesus?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. So, yeah, something unique to know is that the Christian faith rises and falls on the personhood and activity of Jesus Christ. We don't just believe that Jesus existed. Lots of people believe that. We believe that he was and is the Son of God, that he's God incarnate in human flesh, that he lived a sinless life, that he taught without error, that he was crucified. And when he was crucified, he wasn't just executed, but actually his crucifixion was to make atonement for the sins of humanity, that Jesus' blood was shed for us, and that he rose from the dead. And so we believe that he's more than a prophet or more than a good moral teacher, that he was and is God, that he claimed that about himself, that he did miracles, and that he is unique in all of human existence, that he's the promised king of the world. And so he's a really big deal to Christians. So when we say we believe in Jesus, what we're claiming is that the Jesus presented in the Bible, we think is accurately reported, that the history that's there is real history, and that him being alive has saving implications for every person who believes in him.
I've heard a number of people say like, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. I believe he was a real person.
Yeah.
But then they don't necessarily believe that he is the Son of God.
Absolutely.
And that's what we believe.
Right. And there's a great verse I love. It's 1 Corinthians 15, 12, where Paul says, "But if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say there is no resurrection of the dead? If there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised." Listen to this. This is verse 14. "And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith." So in other words, the idea is that, okay, if Jesus rose from the dead, you should be a Christian, because it means that he's Lord and God. It means he really has died for your sin and risen from the dead. And if he didn't rise from the dead, you should not be a Christian. Like the Bible actually puts it that simple. And so for us, a lot of the reasons why like we'll give Christians believe in Jesus and why we think you should is going to center on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Like if that happened, this thing is true. And if it didn't, it's not.
Yeah. I love when a complicated thing is simple.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to bring that up, though, because like how many people, their outs for not being a Christian may be, okay, what do you guys believe about a global flood, or how old the earth is, or how literal do I take this or take that? And all those questions are valid, and all those questions should be chewed on, discussed, and examined, but none of them are the thing that makes or breaks the Christian faith.
Yeah.
What makes or breaks our faith is, did Jesus rise from the dead?
Right. Now, you went right into Scripture, and I think in this episode, we're talking about, logical reasons to believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
And if, one of the arguments, debates, conversations, argument just sounds so harsh.
Okay.
But one of the arguments for Jesus would be, diving into what Scripture says, is what the Bible says about Jesus. But if you're talking to someone who doesn't believe in Jesus, like that's a biased,
it's a leap.
Source.
Yeah. So to clarify, I don't know that anyone contests that the Apostle Paul wrote the book of 1 Corinthians and that he wrote it early. And so the reason I'm bringing it up right now is not to say, okay, here's this verse, and so therefore I'm going to assume that you believe in biblical authority. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it shows you a window of what Christians have believed from the beginning.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So this isn't a thing of like, hey, this, and we'll get to this in the history episode, but it's not a thing of like, hey, this developed later on. And so what I want us to see is, okay, now this has always been the claim that if Jesus died and rose, be a Christian, and if he didn't, don't. Like that's been here from the jump.
Yeah. And actually, you mentioned a future episode. So where we're going with these 3 episodes, in case you're listening to them as they're coming out, and you're like, well, what's the next one going to be? So this one is why do Christians believe in Jesus, specifically looking at the logical and intellectual reasons. And then the next episode is going to be, we're going to be talking about prophecies, specifically fulfilled by Jesus.
Where the Christians claim are filled by Jesus, yeah.
Yes. And the idea there is that Jesus isn't just at the end of the Bible in the New Testament.
Right.
That he is woven all the way through through the Old Testament via these prophecies.
Yes.
Right?
And many of them are outside of his control. They're not things that he could have done to or for himself. And if they are true, they point to a real God speaking in the real world hundreds of years before Jesus arrives on the scene.
So cool.
Yeah.
And then the final part of this 3-part series is Jesus in history.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll be looking at historical evidence for the idea of Jesus's existence, the resurrection. And so, I don't know anybody that would contest that Jesus is probably the most influential figure in human history. And so with that in mind, it makes sense that the scriptures are not the only place that he's written about. And so we want to just show that like this is as best we can tell real history, and there are reasons to believe the accounts in the Bible are historical. So we'll talk about that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a good series. I'm excited about this episode because I am a thinker, And I've always been drawn to the idea of like, it's not, I don't believe in Jesus because I just have this feeling that it's true. It's like, no, like, show me, where's the proof?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been that way my whole life. And Bert, I'm curious if you, when you were younger, younger in your faith, you know so much now, but early on in your faith, did you have like a classic argument that you would use as to why Jesus is real?
No.
What?
No. So, look, and I think I talked about this on our episode. It was called Why Do Christians Do Podcasts, where we each shared our testimony. And
Yeah.
like, okay, my coming to faith was very experiential in nature. And so it wasn't a thing of somebody arguing me into it or out of it. Now, there are folks that is their story, and those arguments are valid. But for me, it was much more personal. I bring that up as well. Sometimes when people say that, they'll be like, like a reason that I'm not going to be a believer, or that it's ridiculous to be a believer is, people are raised in stuff, and so they just pick up worldviews, and so they're looking for confirmation bias or what have you. Sometimes, sure. I would just say this though, like I remember it was I think it was Ricky Gervais. He said years ago, he was like, listen, you believe in this God here, but here's all these other people around the world who believe in other gods. So what are the chances that you're right and they're wrong? The issue with that kind of thinking is it disregards the idea of truth. In other words, something is true regardless of whether or not I believe it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Christianity is not a thing of, hey, it's a philosophy and we're trying to come up with gleanings about how life is to be lived. It is very much rooted in, did this story happen? And so that's the grappling, not how many people believe it or not, but is it true? Is it based on things that are rooted in a chain of events that really happened in human history? And so maybe, you hear this and you're not a Christian and you're like, okay, that's very convenient for you to believe because it confirms what you already believe. Well, no. In the years post my conversion, as I chew through things, and I think all of us at points are challenged in our faith, there have been moments where I'll be like, okay, man, I'm struggling with some doubt here. I'm struggling with some doubt there. And these are things that I just, in those moments, I can't get away from. And I think, and my hope is, if you're listening to this and you're not a Christian, first of all, thank you for taking the time to do that. But secondly, that these are questions that, or issues that maybe you haven't thought about and you really just need to grapple with before saying, no, I'm not going to be a Christian. Or hopefully you'll say, all right, yeah, this is something that sways me.
Mm-hmm. For me, I am a very intellectual person, mm-hmm. But when I was early on in my faith, I would be like, kind of that classic, God, if you're real, would you show me you are?
Really?
Yeah. And stories, little, big and small. And sometimes I doubt, like, oh, was that really God, or was that my imagination? Like, filling in the blanks of, is God really there? Is he really taking care of me? And I think I might have shared this on a previous episode, but I mean, most recently, it's not textbook logical why God is real, but it's logical from my perspective. About a year ago, I was on a motorcycle trip and I was driving through a storm, and I was freaked out that I was going to crash this motorcycle in Indianapolis, and because it was raining, and I was just like, God, I need you. I can't do this without you. I see a rainbow. The literal clouds above the road part.
Wow.
While I'm praying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on a beltway, and the road turns like it does around a city, and now I'm facing the clouds again.
Mm-hmm.
I pray the same prayer. God, you did it before. Would you do it again? I see a second rainbow. The clouds part directly over the road in front of me.
Wow.
This is not a straight road. This is a circular road around a city. It proceeded to happen 3 more times, 5 times total.
Wow.
And I'm just like, that's not how clouds move. So for me, logically, it's like this, and it happened when I was praying.
Yeah.
And I'm just
Yeah.
like, all right, here's the evidence in my life that God is literally moving in my actual life.
Well, that kind of reminds me of maybe something that we should bring up to you is lens of interpretation, right? So maybe you're somebody who hears that and you go, well, there it is. Like he's looking for God in prayer. To which my response would be, okay, how do you account for it? Does it prove that there's a God? No. And if you hear a story like that and you want there to not be a God, you will find a reason for that story to not be accurate.
Oh yeah, there's rainstorms all the time. Just happened to be moving in a circle that day.
Or you'll go, well, listen, okay, that happened to him, but here's these other people who prayed and the clouds didn't part.
Right.
Okay, that's fair. There's a thing, it's called Occam's razor, which is the idea that the simplest explanation is probably the correct one, right? As we kind of shed things down and get rid of conspiracy and get rid of all kinds of fluff, the basic thing is going to be what's probably right. Okay. I'm going to challenge you as we listen to these things. If you want an out with them, you'll probably find one. Yet, so let's just acknowledge that up front. Really, okay, I'm a believer. Okay, I believe in Jesus. I want you to believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
I want to believe in Jesus. If you are not, do you have something to lose by believing in Jesus? Relationship, pride, income, status, whatever. Like, let's acknowledge that there is no such thing as an unbiased party in this conversation. I'll own that on my end. Okay, I'm a minister. Of course I want there to be a Jesus.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I'm wrong. And so let's bring this down to basic logic of what would be the simplest explanation for some of these things that I think, unless Jesus rose, there is not a simple explanation.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought that up. That's just really cool that you would. We use the phrase cards on the table so much in this podcast.
And we mean it every time.
Yeah. But so let's dive in. Give me one of the reasons why Christians believe in Jesus.
Okay, well, I think the first thing that you got to be able to grapple with, and why Christians have historically been like, whoa, is the nature of the resurrection accounts themselves. Okay, so all four Gospels say the following thing. They say that Jesus died, and when he died, no one believed in him. Now, this is important because one of the claims will be that Jesus only appeared to people who believed in him after he, quote unquote, rose. Now, the problem with that viewpoint is that we know, like they believed up in like his disciples, people who were his followers, they believed in him up until he was arrested and executed. And that's why you see in the gospel accounts his disciples fleeing when he is arrested, because for him to be jailed and then ultimately killed, it meant to them that he could not be the Messiah that he claimed to be. Now, here's why this is important. It's not just good drama for a story. Let's take the aftermath of that, and so that we can see that, no, that's probably historically accurate. First would be this. The nature of who Jesus first appears to when he rises. Okay, so you go to the gospel accounts, and the first people that he appears to, like on Easter Sunday, it's not his disciples. It's not the 12 apostles. It's a group of women who have come to the tomb where his body is. This is important to realize, because when they go to the tomb, they're not expecting him to be alive. It's not a thing like, hey, we were counting down, and all right, it's Sunday morning now. Let's open up the tomb and we'll shake hands and high five. Now they show up with burial spices. Now you might say, okay, what's the significance of that? Like, why am I bringing that up? Because, okay, but I don't believe in the Bible. Okay, here's why this is important. Because in the first century, where this story takes place and where it was written, if you were going to fabricate a rising from the dead of your proposed Messiah, the people that you have him first appear to are not going to be women. And the reason they're not going to be is because it's a very patriarchal society, one as such where the Jewish historian Josephus wrote about this, that women were seen as unreliable witnesses to the point where their testimony alone, like if it's just their testimony, that was not admissible in court. Like I said, I mean, it's a very different time where men just are not listening to them. And so if you're going to say, all right, Jesus rose from the dead, and the very first people that he appears to are women, you've essentially, to any man in the first century, you just shot yourself in the foot. And the reason is because they're going to like, well, why in the world would you believe in that then? Because, well, listen, we know the ladies aren't that reliable. They're this, they're that. Okay. And yet the Gospels are absolutely clear. That's who Jesus goes to. Mm-hmm. Now, I can't account for that unless it actually happened, because it makes no sense in that historical context for that to be a thing.
If you were to picture your favorite Ocean's 11 heist movie, if you were to convince an entire group of people that, you know, we're going to fake this religion.
Yeah, you don't do it that way.
You're not going to.
In fact, let's take it a step further. What you do is you make it a thing. Hey, if you're the founders of said religion, okay, let's say you're Peter or you're John. All right, you know what you do? You make it a thing where you write a story that gives you credibility. And so you make a thing of, okay, even though, these other people didn't believe in Jesus, here's Peter. I never denied him. I believed him the whole time. All right. Mm-hmm. And the gospel accounts are like, Peter denied him 3 times. He denied him to a middle school girl that he was afraid of. Like it's humiliating for Peter unless it's true. All right. And so like what you don't do is you don't form a religion that's, first of all, whose first witnesses are people that nobody's going to listen to. Secondly, you don't form it on the testimony of men who have shown themselves to be cowards. You don't form it on the testimony of people who sociologically have no importance. Again, we look at this with a 21st century mindset, which tends to assume camaraderie of human species, i.e., that every person is equal. Okay, like that we look at this, we go, hey, no matter your socioeconomic status, your health, your gender, your race, none of those have frequent or have bearing on how important you are as a person. Okay, but something you have to understand is that worldview is not inherent to human nature. You go overseas. I mean, there are places. I have a buddy who lives in Abu Dhabi, where racism against certain people groups it's just expected, because the folks there have not grown up with a Christian worldview. Even if you're not a Christian, but you're here in the West, you've been influenced by looking at the world, and I would just tell you, largely through the teachings of Jesus Christ, even if you reject them. This idea of, hey, treat others as you want them to treat you, and every person is equal, that came from Jesus. Okay, yeah. But you go back to the first century, okay? They had a mindset which was might equals right. Like if you are rich, if you're powerful, then you're important. Otherwise, you're not. Okay. And yet, who does Jesus appear to? Does he appear to the rich and the powerful? No. Again, he goes right to the commoners. He goes right to people. Like, now, if you're going to make this thing up, okay, we know that Pilate had an issue with Jesus in the gospel narratives. You have Jesus appear to Pilate, who's the governor of Judea. You bring Jesus to Caesar. You bring Jesus to some people that, matter to the rest of the world. But that's not where he shows up. And then we can take a step further. Okay, let's talk about those disciples that we've mentioned earlier.
Well, and just to a footnote, or that's how Jesus came into the world too.
Yeah, absolutely.
The birth of Jesus was the most humble way for a king to show up, let alone the king of the world.
Yes, completely overlooked. Yes. Yeah. So let's go on a little bit more. So with his disciples, okay, the gospel narratives are clear that they all turned tail and ran, with the exception of in the Gospel of John. John is there at the foot of the cross, taking Jesus' mother as his own. He's doing this because he believes Jesus is gone from here out. Still not a believer in Jesus. Like at Jesus' crucifixion and death, they're thinking he's going to stay dead. Okay? And yet something remarkable happens. So you've got the disciples, when Jesus is arrested, they flee. Okay, and they go home. They lock themselves in rooms for fear of being arrested themselves. I mean, they're just terrified. If our boss is killed, we could be next. Okay, and yet, historically speaking, I don't know anybody that would argue against this. These same guys who abandoned Jesus in his hour of need, 50 days later, on Pentecost, are the ones who show up in the same city, who, like the city of officials who killed Jesus, and they are proclaiming without fail, he's alive and we've seen him, and essentially say that you're sorry, guys, like you messed it up. And then we'll go so far as to say this, like, you can kill us, but we can't deny what we've seen. Okay. So what causes these cowards to, inside about a month and a half, completely turn around and go right back into the fire. And then you could say, well, they wanted to save face, or they want to start a religion. But then you've got some more problems. And the reason that you've got problems is this: Christianity as we know it is not how it began. So if we're saying, all right, they want to start a religion, if it was a religion where doing that gives them respect, income, notoriety, well-being, absolutely it could be fake. But that's not what happened to the apostles.
Right. We imagine like a modern, Peter became a cult leader of a huge church and demanded lots of money.
Right, with land and big buildings and all that stuff and a book deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not them. All of them lose everything for it. Mm-hmm. I mean, every apostle minus John is ultimately martyred for their faith, and they never turn in testimony. They maintain until the end, Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus rose from the dead. John himself, history tells us, was boiled alive in oil and went through all kinds of immense torture, still never recanted. And so what you've got to ask is, okay, if these guys are making this up, that, hey, we saw Jesus, all right, what accounts for this rapid change in heart and this tenacity to stay with it when doing so cost them everything? And it did. It cost them income. They had to flee. They had to be in hiding for their lives. Like, it was brutal to be a church leader in the first century. And there they remained. And you could look at it, and sometimes what people will do is they'll say, well, like maybe they hallucinated Jesus rising from the dead. That's ridiculous. And the reason that's ridiculous is because knowing what first century Jewish men believed about Messiah, that one of the things that he would do is enact the reign of God on the earth. Jesus, to them, was the conquering Messiah who defeated death itself. And so if you say, well, maybe they saw like a hallucination, they claim that he ate with them. If you say that, some people, they believe they'll say ridiculous things sometimes, like because it's a more convoluted way of getting out of Jesus rising from the dead. Because if he did that, it means Christianity is true. They don't want to do that. So some people, what they'll do is they'll say, well, maybe like Jesus on the cross, he was drugged and he slept it off in the tomb, and then on Sunday morning got up. The Christian historian / scholar N.T. Wright has the best line about that, and his line is, Roman soldiers knew how to kill people.
Yeah.
Okay. And he goes, this is in his book, Surprised by Hope. And he says, no disciple is going to confuse a groggy, half-drugged Christ as the risen king who has defeated death itself. Okay. No, like that's unreasonable to believe. Again, I can only bring it back to, if I'm bringing it to the simplest explanation, it's probably the best, is that Jesus rose. Well, that's not a simple explanation because people don't rise from the dead. To which I would say, yes, that has generally been my experience as well. But if we are dealing with a supernatural God who created everything from nothing, all bets are off.
Right.
And so how do we account for the women at the tomb? How do we account for the changed disciples? Hey, here's another one. How do we account for the skeptics who instantly become disciples? Okay, let me give you a little bit with that. All right. So,
yeah.
All right. So, according to history, again, I don't know anybody who's going to challenge this. The leader of the church in Jerusalem after the church begins is James, the brother of Jesus. Okay. Now this is important because the Gospels are uniform in that while Jesus was in his earthly ministry before his death and resurrection, James did not believe in Jesus. And you can't blame him. Like, if you've got siblings and one of them claimed to be the Son of God, it would take a lot for you to believe that.
Right.
Right? Okay, well, James didn't. And yet, Christian accounts about the resurrection of Jesus are that after Jesus rose, James converted upon seeing him like risen from the dead. In fact, again, like 1 Corinthians, which is written before 60 AD, you can date it probably around 54 AD or earlier. So within 20, 25 years of the gospel story of Jesus rising from the dead, you've already got Christians like Paul citing that James is one of the people that Jesus appeared to after rising from the dead. Okay. How do you account for this guy making that conversion? How do you account for, the first great controversy of the church is Judaizers, people who believe in that in order to be a faithful Christian, you don't have to just believe in Jesus, but also you have to keep Jewish law. And we know that a lot of them were Pharisees. Okay, what causes a Pharisee, who in the Bible text are the enemies of Jesus, what causes them to convert? It's not all of them, but certainly that segment is there. We could talk about how Jesus is, I mentioned earlier this idea that Jesus did not just appear to those who believed in him. In fact, the only people who he appeared to were people who didn't believe in him, because nobody believed in him when he died. Okay, and it's not, his appearances aren't just in a back room somewhere. There are gospel accounts that talk about how he appeared to 500 people at once and spoke with them and spent time with them post-resurrection. So this isn't a thing of, hey, it's a shady thing with just a couple people in the background. In fact, it's just something else to note, is that Paul, when he's writing about these things in 1 Corinthians, at the time of writing, most of the people that he's referencing, and certainly the towns where he's referencing, are still around, and most of the people are still alive. And so if you've got a dispute with what's being claimed here, all you got to do is go into town. Hey, here's Jerusalem, and Jesus appeared to 500 people at once. It seems to me you'd be able to find somebody who'd be able to corroborate that.
Yeah.
Because these accounts are so close to the claimed events. And so, go on.
So you mentioned 50 AD.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of that, what year would Jesus have died?
Between 30 and 33.
Okay. So that would mean that it's around 15 to 20 years after the death of Jesus, this is written down. So in today's terms, it's 2024.
Mm-hmm.
That's like me writing an account of something that happened in 2004.
Or Y2K. We can bring it the date up to about, probably some folks will date 1 Corinthians about 53, 54.
Yeah. And I know history moves a lot faster in these last 50, 100 years.
Yeah.
But a lot has happened in 20 years. Wouldn't that make it less legit?
No, I don't think
readings,
so.
The writings?
I'll tell you why I don't think so. Okay. So right now, it is 2024. Okay. So in 2004, June 25th, 2004, I had an event that changed my life. My wife and I got married.
Oh, we didn't plan this.
Yeah, okay.
That's great.
Yeah. I remember everything about that day. I remember what my tux looked like. I remember what I had for breakfast. I remember what I was doing in the hours going into our wedding. I remember feeling what I felt. Okay, because that's an incredibly significant moment for me. Mm-hmm. Parents, you probably get this, where you remember a lot around maybe the birth of one of your children. Okay, and no matter how much time goes away, if the event is significant, you tend to remember stuff around it. Okay. If suddenly the nature of human existence and life in death has been redefined for you as a person, what are the chances you're going to remember it really well?
Okay.
Yeah. If it's a thing of, 20 years ago, I played hopscotch. Well, okay, probably not going to remember that all that well. But if, hey, a guy that I saw die wasn't dead again and then invited me to breakfast, I'm going to remember a lot about that.
Yeah. Okay. That's actually, I'm really glad that I asked that question, because I thought Jesus died closer to the 0 mark.
Yeah.
Which is also that common, thought that AD stands for after death, which is not true.
Yeah, it's ad dominum. Yeah.
And, I used to know. Anyway, but so cool. So only about 20 years. That's good.
Yeah. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in the history episode. But just this idea, from the jump, Christians have been making this claim of the centrality of the resurrection of Jesus. And it's in too short of a span to be, I don't want to say fabricated, but indulged, or to exist without accountability. And so you can make whatever you want of it, but you've got to be able to account for these disciples that are happening. And I would just say the nature of the event. Maybe that's something else just to bring up, is that the resurrection narrative of Jesus, like when we go, okay, well, why should I believe in that? there's some things to note. Number one, Jesus was not unique in claiming to be the Messiah in the first century. There are lots of people who claim that all the time. There were all kinds of revolts that happened against the Roman Empire. So you have to ask, okay, like, why is it this religion endured when there were...
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Christians can give an account for that. It's because it's true, and we think that the stories are logical to believe in. Outside of that, you're going to have some more difficulties. Like, so if you say, well, it endured because these people claimed that their Messiah rose from the dead, even that creates a problem. And the reason that creates a problem is because nobody thought of the resurrection of the dead in that way. Like, again, the Christianity originates among Jewish men and women in the first century, okay? Their belief up until that moment is that the resurrection is not one guy. It's everybody at the end of the world that God raises, and then the thing called the day of the Lord, like God's reign on the earth, comes in. It's a time of judgment. And suddenly Jesus rises, and he goes like, I'm the first fruits of it, and I've been telling you this was going to happen. And here's an example of you seeing it here in the Old Testament and prophecies fulfilled. None of them were thinking about it like this way. And so if you say, all right, well, they were inventing this idea of resurrection, you got to account for why they would invent it, why they would be okay with everybody disagreeing with them about what the resurrection was. And again, you've got to be able to account for why they'd be willing to lose everything for said belief. It doesn't save face for them. It makes their life exponentially worse.
So the whole episode's about intellectual, logical reasons for believing in Jesus. But we're not the only faith that has, kind of a Jesus figure as a part of it. How do we know we have the right one?
Yeah. Well, so something that's happened in the avenue of, whether you say misinformation or the internet, is there are common claims that people will make about how this idea of a God coming into the world and dying it's not unique to Christianity. Sometimes people will cite things like the Egyptian god Osiris or Dionysus or what have you. You need to know that with that kind of stuff, those kinds of claims have been largely debunked. So whenever the claim tends to start to look like the gospel narrative, it's usually that story has been developed long after Christianity, or if the story looks like, well, it's a god and they died and rose, it normally doesn't look anything like what the Gospels are claiming about Jesus, like in an earlier manuscript. I bring this up to say, for instance, like, there's common things people will say in an objection. They'll be like, well, like Jesus was a healer. Well, here's these ancient rabbis who were healers. But when you take the time to read the stories, it's like, no, those healings don't look anything like the healings of Jesus. Like, Jesus heals claiming to be God and restoring humankind. Here's a guy whose quote unquote healing is dunking people in the water a lot and creating potions and things like that. It's not really the same in essence at all. So you just need to be careful with those kinds of claims because they're debunked, just to say it easily.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to keep asking more questions about the logical, the topic of this episode, but I think we've done a good job talking about that here, and maybe there's a part we didn't get to. Well, we've got 2 more episodes about why do Christians believe in Jesus.
So excited.
And maybe that will be answered in a future episode specifically because it just fits into a different category. Like, I feel like the conversation of Jesus in history, like we've crossed that line into some historical accounts.
Oh, but we got a lot more
today. Yeah. So we have a lot more coming. If you want to suggest another future episode, maybe even a part 4. No,
maybe you have questions about what we've said.
Yeah, send us an email, podcast@wearethebridge.org. We would love to hear from you, love to answer your questions. And if you love this podcast, share it with a friend.
Maybe do that like with something like this. Like, we're talking about like Jesus being real. Why not give that a share?
Yeah. And we love this podcast. Like, for me, I love being able to share my faith in this way, where I might not be able to have a half-hour conversation with an old friend, but I can say, oh yeah, but we did talk about why do Christians deny science, which might be something you're thinking about because you clicked on this episode. Christians don't deny science, by the way, but it was
spoilers,
but it worked for the title. So we'd love to hear from you, and share it with a friend. Thanks for listening.